Hello everyone, welcome back to a new episode of Here for the Crack with me, Emma Neal. I'm actually joined today by my gorgeous darling Tigger. Oh my god. Tigger, we're so happy for you to join us today. If you're watching this on YouTube right now, you'll be able to see my gorgeous darling cat right beside me. She never really joins me for the podcast. I don't know if she doesn't like the lights or what, but she never really pays much attention. She's not a show girly. She's not I was gonna say she's not an attention seeker. She absolutely is an attention seeker every other minute of life, but for some reason when I start podcasting she just goes off into another little room. But she's here to join us today. Anyway, I'm actually recovering from an illness. I had like a bit of a flu at the weekend there. It wasn't a nice time. It was not a nice time. One of those ones where you're like, wake up and you're saturated in your own sweat from having such a high temperature and, can't breathe through your nose. I was literally walking around with one of those Vicks sticks, just like popping it in one nostril and then popping it straight in the other, just like constantly changing in between the two to try and just like get a bit of air through my nose. But I actually feel so much better now. I've been avoiding doing the podcast because I didn't want to get on here with like that horrible nasally voice, because I know you guys don't want to listen to that. So I was really trying to save you from having to listen to that. So I put off recording till now. Hopefully I don't sound too bad. I do think I've made a good recovery today. I've been back to back on the Lemsips and literally sleeping 10 hours every single fucking night trying to recover. I think not drinking definitely helps when you feel like you're getting sick. Like if I had have drank this weekend, God, I would literally be floored the entire week. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this not drinking life at the moment. I think I'm just kind of in preparation mode for December because I'm very aware of how much drinking there's going to be over the Christmas period. And actually, I kind of want to talk a little bit about that maybe in another episode, like about avoiding burnout and like the pressure to always be doing absolutely everything around the Christmas period. And also, not even that, but it's like, it's so fun as well. Like you want to be a part of it all, even though it's like pressurizing on one hand, it's also like, but you don't want to miss out on it yourself on the other hand. So I don't know, it's a really fun time, but it's also a really fucking chaotic time. Like December is a crazy, crazy month and I'm very excited for it, but I'm like, oh my God, am I ready for this? And I feel like to allow myself to actually be prepared and be ready for it, I'm just really trying to chill this November. I went to see Cillian Murphy's new movie this weekend. It's called Small Things Like These. Is it? Wait, small? I don't know. Something like that. I read the book of it last year. It's by an Irish author called Claire Keegan. I read two of her books actually. I read Small Things Like These and Foster, and both were really good. Both are really short reads as well, like around the 100-page mark. If you're looking for a little short but good read, highly recommend. And I know that Foster has also been turned into a film that I think is in Irish. It's called A Quiet Girl, which apparently is so good, but I haven't worked out where I can watch that just yet, so I haven't seen it yet. I'm like slowly making my way through a big long list of movies that I've never seen, and it's really criminal that I haven't seen. So I've actually really been in my movie era recently. But yeah, went to the cinema to see Cillian Murphy's new film and it was so good. It was all about the Magdalene laundry scandal in the Catholic Church, but kind of like not actually about it, more kind of like about a person that sees it happening but not fully, but kind of has a little bit of an insight into it and like how much it's like covered up and that kind of thing. But yeah, I could watch Cillian Murphy in absolutely anything. He's so good. Actually, that's a lie because I've tried to watch, what's that called, Peaky Blinders. Can't get into it for the life of me, so that's a lie. Something about Irish film and Irish actors is really hot right now, isn't it? Like the whole world is loving Irish film and actors. We're really popping off and I love that for us. Oh my God, guys, I finally got my wardrobes installed. I literally couldn't be happier. I feel like I've got a Hannah Montana wardrobe, like the swiveling wardrobe, even though I don't. That's literally how I feel right now. Like it's actually my happy place. It was already a struggle to get me out of the house, but now I actually will be a recluse because that room is my happy place. There's a few little finishing touches that need done. Like I need to get the handles put on the doors. I've like 2 more shelves to go in. And then once they're in, that's it, fully done. And I'm actually so obsessed. Like I've never felt more inspired by my own wardrobe. I feel like I've gone out and bought so many new clothes when I actually haven't, but it's just because I can see everything for the first time. Because everything just has so much space. It is stunning. So yeah, that's definitely my peak of this week. My pit of this week was just being sick. And my recommendation of this week actually is going to be an audiobook. I'm currently listening to Lessons in Chemistry as an audiobook. No, I know I'm very late to the game on this one. This book was like hot topic, like a year or 2 ago. So I mean, I'm sure a lot of you listening to this will have probably already read it by now and watched the series, because I know it got made into a TV series. So just ignore me if that is the case. But anyway, I'm listening to it on Audible and I'm absolutely loving it. I'm really iffy about like audiobooks. There's certain books I can and can't listen to as audiobooks. I always listen to the preview of the book before getting it, because then it's really easy to gauge whether you're going to like it, because I think you can just tell by the narrator and just by the mood of the book based on that preview, if that makes sense. So I always just like listen to the whole preview and then I'll decide from there. But yeah, it's a really good book. I'm going to watch the series after, so I'll let you know how I go with that. I know I said to you guys last week, at the end of last week's episode, that I would probably come back and talk more on the topic because I had so much more to say and a lot more like research that I'd done around different things. I guess last week's episode just very much turned into a history lesson, which was well needed, and I didn't get a chance to speak more on like everything else surrounding Trump being elected for president. So I did toy with whether I would come back on and talk more about it, because I thought, is that a bit much? Like, do people want to sit and listen to me talk about this for 2 weeks in a row? And I've just ultimately decided that I don't care. I'm going to talk about it more. As you can probably tell from last week's episode, it is something that I'm so passionate about, and there is so much more conversation to be had about it. I feel like I barely even scratched the surface, and probably still won't throughout this whole episode, to be honest. And so yeah, today I am going to talk a little bit more about Trump being elected for president and what that means for women across the globe. You're getting another episode full of feminine rage, essentially. Oh my God, I'm getting so nasally already. I'm so sorry. I need to go get a Lemsip for this. Right, I have actually decided to start off this episode. I am going to read out to you a journal entry that I wrote on the day of Trump getting elected. I have toyed with this idea and whether this is the right thing to do, whether I want to open myself up like this. Like, it just feels very raw and very vulnerable. I don't know who the fuck shares their journal entries online. Are you fucking insane? Yeah. But I've decided that, you know what, it's actually the best thing to do, because it is raw and it's full of emotion, and it very well articulates exactly how I feel about the situation, and so much more than that. Because I think when you sit down and journal and give yourself the time and space to really think about what you're writing, as opposed to just like, well, saying it in a podcast or saying it in a conversation, you're able to, well, I personally am able to articulate myself a lot better. So I figured, why not just read that entry out? So yeah, here goes nothing. Trump won the US elections today. I feel so heavy and sad. How can there be enough people, 72.26 million people for that matter, voting for a man that is a convicted felon, a convicted rapist, a misogynist, racist, transphobic, homophobic, and God knows what else? It's so fucking scary to think there's actually that amount of people going out voting for him and agreeing with him and the absolutely wild things that he says. I watched a video that said since the Roe v. Wade legislation was overturned and Texas implemented the ban, 26,000 women have had to give birth to their rapists' babies. I literally burst out crying. Imagine. Women are losing their lives because doctors won't give them life-saving medical attention, all in favour of protecting this life, as if this life is more important than the women at stake. This is medical negligence. This so-called life that apparently has more rights than a living, breathing woman with family and friends dying in front of their eyes. The woman, whether she be 14 or 50, being told that she is not as important as this bundle of cells. Calling said bundle of cells an unborn life is complete insanity to me. It's like saying an unplanted seed is the exact same thing as the tall sunflower in your garden. It's not the same thing. Okay, yes, it might have the potential to grow into the same thing in a certain environment with a lot of factors also needing to be correct for it to grow. But take it out and it quite literally is just a bundle of cells. Put it in a petri dish, it's not going to magically become a baby. In the same way, the sunflower seed will stay just that, a seed. They might have the potential to grow into a baby, but so does every sperm cell and every egg in a woman's body. But we don't act as if they're all cruelly unborn babies. In fact, I can assure you those little cells know no better. They're not knocking on the doors of your womb begging to be born, and in the words of Ricky Gervais, there's not a long cabinet full of potential ghost fetuses going, "We want to be born," in reference to what he thinks when he's asked why he doesn't have kids, because they simply don't exist. There's nothing pro-life about these pro-lifers anyway. They say they're pro-life, but they don't give a toss about the mother's life. They say they're pro-life, but what are they actually doing to help babies and children that are already living when it comes to childcare, healthcare, or education? They say they're pro-life, but what about when the woman is forced to have the baby and gives it up for adoption? Are they all fleeting to adopt and foster these babies that they seem to care so much about the lives of? They say they're pro-life, but when the child grows up and comes out as gay, they think they're disgusting. They say they're pro-life, but when the child is trans, they spit in their face and deny their existence. They say they're pro-life, but once that black baby is old enough to go to school with their children, they'll teach them racist slurs. They say they're pro-life, but when that baby girl gets raped by her abusive stepfather, they'll force her to give birth. They say they're pro-life, but don't you dare mention bringing in more strict gun laws because that's our right, like it's not killing people in the triple digits every single day. They say they're pro-life, but there's nothing pro-life about them. They care about the control of women. They care about making it a woman's problem, preventing her from making a decision about her own body, her own life. Like she doesn't deserve to make the same choices a man does when he decides to walk away because fatherhood isn't for him. They don't trust women to make decisions for themselves. What's best for her, her life, her sanity, her physical health, her mental health, her education, her career, her financial circumstance. In a world where the cost of living has got so out of hand that people working full-time jobs still have to go to food banks. They don't trust women to make decisions based on what's best for the baby and the life that they would live. In a world where seeing a different natural disaster on the news every day or week has become the new norm. They don't trust women to make a decision as if every single pregnancy isn't under completely different circumstances. So many of the tragic stories that are told online about really awful circumstances of women dying due to complications or 14-year-olds having to give birth to their stepfather's child after being raped by the person who's meant to be their caregiver, the person they're supposed to be able to trust, are absolutely gut-wrenching and are a way of conveying to these extremists just how serious it is to ban abortion and what that can cause. Use those stories. I really hope they stick. I hope these people can find it in their hearts to show compassion and empathy. But what about the women that just don't want children? They never imagined it for themselves, or they're just not ready. They don't have the support. They're not where they wanted to be emotionally, physically, or financially. They don't have a stable home. They have an abusive partner. They haven't finished their education, or maybe they've already had 4 kids and just don't have the capacity for a 5th. Should we really be forcing people to bring children into this world that just outright don't want to? Surely that in itself is enough of a reason. And oh, the irony of how if you can't afford to travel for an abortion, this means being forced to raise a child in that same financial situation. It takes 2 people to make a baby, yet one has the ability to walk away and wash their hands clean of the whole situation. Carry on as if nothing has changed, continue with their education, their job, their travels, other love interests, move country, disappear off the face of the earth. Meanwhile, the other is forced to carry a child inside of them for 9 months and then live with this new responsibility that affects absolutely everything else for the rest of their life. Condoms break, the pill when taken how most people take it, forgetting the odd day whilst travelling or at the weekend because your routine is different so you don't take it at the same time, isn't actually that effective and also plays havoc with women's bodies and mental health. The implant can do the same and make women bleed for months on end, or the opposite if you're lucky. And dare I even mention the coil, the piece of metal that goes in there that I've only ever heard horror stories of. Stories of women curled over screaming in pain, begging for some form of anaesthetic, only to be dismissed by doctors and told they're grand to drive home. But let's not get into the topic of women's pain not being taken seriously by medical professionals, or we will be here all day. The morning after pill, as I very well know, only works if you've not yet ovulated by preventing ovulation. So if you have already ovulated, you may as well flush that 35 quid down the toilet, because that tablet will be about as useful as eating a cube of sugar. These things happen. Sometimes it's really unlucky, and sometimes, yes, it's careless and a lesson learned. But should a small mishap or mistake mean we should punish women by forcing them to deal with the consequences for the rest of their life in the form of a human, when medically there is the option not to? Surely the guilt, fear, and shame that can come from having an abortion is more than enough. That's not to say women should feel ashamed in making that decision. I felt no shame or guilt in making that decision for myself, simply because I knew it was the right decision for me to make. But due to people's beliefs, families' beliefs, the church, religious communities, teachings in school, taught attitudes, loud voices on TV and in the media, politicians, hearing others in your life being judged for also making that decision, a great deal of shame can be carried with that decision. And so where do our values lie, and what are we as a society if we don't have empathy and compassion for women in their most vulnerable states? If we don't respect and value women enough to let them make decisions for themselves and allow them to live and thrive and decide if and when motherhood is for them. I am scared for what the future holds. America is a hugely influential country, and although right now it feels like everyone in Europe and elsewhere outside of the US is looking at Trump and the US in utter disbelief, as if it's a comedy show but not in the slightest bit funny, I also recognise that that's my social media, my For You page, my echo chamber and my social circle. There are probably a lot of other people right now nodding along, clapping their hands together, waiting on their turn. Andrew Tate and his minions are having an absolute field day. Their prayers have been answered. The control over women has been secured, and this isn't some niche part of the internet. That man has over 5 million followers. If we're not careful, we'll end up back where we were 60 years ago. Or actually even more recently, less than 6 years ago for Northern Ireland, which makes it even more scary because it feels like it would be so easy to reinstate, especially considering it wasn't even what our government wanted. It feels so silly to have to remind men that they have a mother, a grandmother, sisters, daughters, girlfriends, wives, all worthy of love, respect and autonomy, as if a woman just existing on this planet isn't enough in itself to recognise that and see them as human. Not just baby makers or sluts or beings that solely exist for how they look or how fuckable they are. Like they don't have a purpose in this world outside of being a role to someone else. The wife of, the girlfriend of, the mother of, the daughter of. Like they're only of importance when referred to as that of a man's. And in this man's world, they'd rather see a convicted felon, liar, cheater, rapist, sexual assaulter, transphobic, homophobic man that talks about women by saying things like grab him by the pussy than see an educated, passionate, empathetic black woman that has worked her life for this as the president of the United States. And that was my journal entry. That was a lot. I just want to add to that, I know that Kamala Harris isn't a perfect candidate, and I know there was so much talk of that on social media. I know Chapel Rowan, for example, came forward on TikTok and was giving off about how she refuses to conform to either side because she doesn't agree with either sides. And I'm not sitting here saying she was the perfect candidate, but I actually don't think there is such thing as a perfect political candidate. We all have in our minds what would be perfect for us, I guess, and that might be individual to every person, but realistically, are you ever gonna get someone where you fully agree with absolutely everything? Probably not. And I just think a lot of the time you do have to choose what's better, but it's just crazy to me that people would rather pick someone that has been accused of 26 cases of sexual misconduct since the 70s. Lots of them were made decades before Trump even ran for president, the argument of people coming forward and only saying that once he became president for attention or anything like that doesn't even stand, because so many of those accusations were well before he even thought about running for president, or like there was ever even mention of it. And like the fact that people are more willing to vote for someone like that and that speaks about women the way he does, it speaks so much for what our society thinks about women. Like how you're actually willing to vote for someone who speaks about women like that versus voting for a woman. Crazy. And something that he did when he was elected the first time was revoke protections against sexual harassment, sexual assault and discrimination in the workplace and in school. So in 2017, he revoked the 2014 Fair Pay and Safe Workplaces order that Obama put in place. And he revoked Obama's campus sexual assault guidelines, which required colleges to take allegations more seriously and hold perpetrators accountable. And he also narrowed the definition of sexual harassment. Like, this man he has an agenda, and he wants people like him to get away with the things that he does also. The ban that Texas now has, like the complete ban that Texas now has on abortion, to the point that like women aren't getting life-saving medical attention when needed, and are like so many women in Texas are dying. It's insane. All you have to do is type into Google women dying Texas, like a combination of words like that, and you will see the influx of articles of people that this is happening to. Like, it's really, really sad, because doctors are scared that anything that they do to a pregnant woman will be seen as like them breaking the law when it comes to abortion, and so they're not getting the healthcare they need. But if we had that complete ban on abortion here, right, or anywhere, no matter where you're listening to this podcast episode or where you're watching it from, if where you're watching it from there was a complete ban like Texas currently has on abortion, you and I would have lost loved ones, family members or friends due to this. Like, there's people in my life, best friends that would not be living to this day, that I would have lost years ago if we had that same ban. Like, I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation. Imagine having lost loved ones, family members, best friends because they weren't given medical attention when they most needed it. Like, is that not medical negligence? Surely in that moment, a woman's life is so much more important. And the thing is, restricting abortion, it doesn't actually stop a huge percentage of people from getting abortions. Because like, if people don't want to have a baby, they don't want to have a baby, point blank. Like, nothing's really changing. Okay, some people, like a very, very small percentage of people might come around to the idea, but majority of people, like, they know whether they want to have it or not, and so they know whether they want an abortion or not. And so by restricting that, you're, as I said in last week's episode, you're just making it more difficult for the more vulnerable people. And you're also making it extremely more dangerous, because, like, for example, if I wanted an abortion and I couldn't get it here, I'm going to find a way to get it. And so that way might be extremely dangerous for me. I might die in the process. I might end up in critical care because it's not regulated, because it's been restricted so much. So like, you're only making that process so much more difficult and so much more dangerous. And the stats show that like restricting abortion doesn't actually reduce the amount of people getting abortions. And as I said, you're just making the most vulnerable people in society, you're just forcing them to have children, which is so fucked up. Like, those who can't afford to travel, those who are in abusive relationships, young people who've been raped, really young people that haven't been given proper sex education and don't even know what their options are. So yeah, to the people that think that by legalizing abortion you're like encouraging abortion, you're most definitely not. Like, I can assure you, no one wants to have an abortion. You know, no one actively wants contraception not to work so that they have to go through having an abortion. Like, an abortion can be quite traumatic for some people. It can be like quite a big ordeal. I can 100% tell you, nobody actually wants to have an abortion. It's just sometimes that's what you have to do. So I hate that argument that some people subscribe to, where they say like, you're just making it another form of contraception. Now people can just like have sex and not use contraceptions and just get an abortion. That's not true. And like, that is literally so far from reality, because people don't want to have abortions. It's like literally a very last resort. I can assure you that. So in America now, because women's rights are up in the air, there's a bit of a movement going on. Women are choosing not to have sex with men, basically, as a fuck you to the system. Which I would love to see, you know, how far we can push that. Because if you really think you can have a say over that, well then, okay, we'll take away your access to our bodies if that's what you want to do. So I think this is a great response. I mean, I don't think we should have to respond by doing this, but needs must. And actually, there was a huge movement in South Korea. It's called the 4B movement, where women were doing the same thing. So they basically were like, men will not be rewarded or have access to our bodies. And 4B stands for 4 Korean words beginning with bi, and bi translates to no. So they all meant no heterosexual marriage, no childbirth, no dating, and no heterosexual sexual relationships. Supporters of the women-led movement refused to date, marry, have sex, or have children with men, effectively boycotting a system that they feel perpetuates gender inequality. And apparently the US are already starting to see this. And actually, do you remember that ad came out? I actually can't remember which dating app it was now, but one of the dating apps came up with a shocking ad. It was so bad, I don't know how it got passed through so many people. But basically, loads of women were choosing not to have sex with men and not to date and stuff, and then the ad was like, come on, you know you want to, type of thing, and everyone was like, what the fuck, cancelled. And apparently there's also been a huge increase in Google searches for vasectomies, which, I mean, vasectomies aren't talked about enough. Vasectomies are reversible. I remember seeing a TikTok once of someone interviewing a guy in America, and they were like asking him his thoughts on abortion. He was basically saying he was pro-life and that he didn't believe in abortion and all that, right? And then the interviewer turned around and was like, okay, well, what do you think about vasectomies? Like, should we be encouraging men to get vasectomies if that's the case, so that women don't get pregnant? And he was like, no, that's their bodies, that's their choice of what they do. Like, they don't have to get vasectomies if they don't want to. And the interviewer was just like, oh my God. Like, some people, honestly, I can't. But yeah, people don't talk about vasectomies enough. Getting the tubes tied. They should teach that in schools. I think why the far right is currently like gaining so much traction, and so many men are leaning that way, is because men are really grappling with these like shifting gender roles. Because it used to be that, you know, men were the highly educated, men were the breadwinners, they had all the power. And so I think feminism trying to create this like more equal playing field makes men feel threatened. They want to kind of put women back in their box. They want to be in charge again. They want to, you know, return to that kind of traditional values of like being the breadwinner and their wife being the homemaker, and like them being very much in control of everything because they have the money and the power. And I feel like they just feel very threatened by this idea of equality. And I actually saw a video where someone was speaking recently about how they used to be like far right and now they've gone the other way, and something that they said really stuck with me. It was, when you come from a position of privilege, equality can feel like oppression, because he felt like as a white man, people wanting all of these like equalities, whether that be, you know, women wanting equalities or gay people wanting equalities when it comes to marriage and things like that, like even though that wasn't affecting him and his life whatsoever, for some reason it felt like oppression in some way. And it's so interesting because the far right only like fuels more hatred. Like, when you actually think about what the far right does, all they do is just fuel more and more and more hatred. They just give you more and more things to be angry about. You know, like little keyboard warriors sitting at home being angry about this and angry about that, and like, oh my God, they're taking our jobs, and they're like, do you know what I mean? Just like all these things running through their head, and they're watching these people in the media that are only like reiterating all of that and then also fueling it even more, like adding more fuel to the fire and giving them more and more things to be angry about. And they're sitting there thinking, see, like I've got even more to be angry about now and this and that. And it's like these people thrive off of making people more divided and more angry, whereas the left brings people together. It brings people together on problems that we all share and that things that benefit all of us, you know, things like education, things like healthcare, things like equal rights. Like it's like bringing everyone together, whereas the right wants to divide people and make you more angry, and they profit off of that ultimately. But yeah, I think a lot of men feel, especially like middle America men, where, you know, they were the people in power, and now it's like women are the most highly educated. Women can often be the breadwinners, although there is still a huge pay gap, so I'm not negating that. But yeah, women having more power makes them freak out in a sense, because they can't get away with the shit that they would have got away with before. Because with women gaining more equality, and also not only that, but with them gaining more money and more power, they're able to choose more what they want and what's good for them. Because I think back in the day, it's like you kind of had to just go with some things just because you couldn't do things for yourself. Like you couldn't go out and make your own money and pay your own rent or pay your own mortgage and provide for your kids or yourself in the way that like you can now. So there was just like some things that women put up with back then, whereas now we can set the standard high. We can be selective about who we date, who we marry, how someone treats us, because we don't need them anymore. We don't need them to financially provide for us. Like we can go to university now. We can open our own bank accounts. We can get our own mortgages. Like it's not like back then where actually women couldn't do any of that shit. And so I think this like raising of the standards, shitty men don't like that because they don't want to have to be a better person. So they just want women to get back in their box so they can keep being like the shitty people that they are and keep not treating people as they should, just in the grounds that they have more power. So they don't like seeing women getting more power. And this is like a way that they can control women and make sure that they're not equal to men, because they don't have the ability to, as I said, like walk away from the situation the way men can. But yeah, people are stockpiling abortion pills. Apparently the main supplier of abortion pills in America got 5,000 requests within less than 12 hours of Trump's win. And as I said, others are considering getting more permanent forms of contraception like vasectomies and fallopian tube removals. I always wonder, right? This is something I always think about. When it comes to the topic of abortion, is it even something men should have like the right to even have a say in? Do you know what I mean? Like say for example, tomorrow we were to have a referendum. Should men really be able to vote in that? That's not a them problem. Like imagine there was a problem that only affected men, but women were all allowed to go out and vote on it as well. I don't know. Sometimes I do think about that because I'm like, okay, yeah, you can have your opinion on it, but should you really have a say over like legally what our rights are to it? I don't know. That seems a bit strange to me. And it's like the same way I wonder with sometimes like why, for example, with gay marriage, that's another thing. Like, it doesn't affect you. Why should you be able to vote on something that actually... But then it's like, that's what a democracy is, isn't it? It's like being able to vote over these things. But sometimes I do sit and deep that. I do think, like, you know, should straight people even be able to vote on, like, a gay marriage referendum? Because ultimately, it doesn't affect them. And, like, it can only benefit people for this society to be more inclusive and more progressive. But people don't want to see equality, which... I don't know, it's really fucked up. Guys, my brain is like really fried right now because it's nearly 8 p.m. and I normally never record podcasts at night. And so I just feel like a little bit all over the place right now with these lights shining in my face. You know what? We'll wrap up the episode with a few statistics. So I did recently, I don't know if I mentioned this in the last episode, but I did recently listen to an audiobook called Little Bang, which really highly recommend. By the way, it's a really great book. So it's a book based in Belfast and it's about a really young like adolescent couple and the girl accidentally falling pregnant and having like no sex education because she went to a Catholic school and had really like strict religious parents. So like it was very much like not talked about whatsoever. And it's written very childishly, which at the start I was like, am I reading a kid's book here? Like, why am I listening to this? And then I was like, actually no, this kind of further proves just how young and naive the characters are. And so in a way I actually really liked it. And also it made it more accessible for young people to read, which I also love, because I can like recommend that for, you know, people as young as 14 or whatever, or even younger than that. So anyway, I really highly recommend you read that book or listen to it on Audible, because Saoirse, what's her name? Saoirse Monica Jackson, is it? The girl that's in Derry Girls. She narrates the female lead in it. So that's actually why I listened to it. But yeah, at the back of the book, there was a lot of statistics on abortion across the UK and Ireland. Actually, no, across the UK. I think it's specific to the UK. Yeah, I think the stats are on a study that was done in the UK. So I'm actually just going to finish off the podcast by reading through those stats. So 1 in 3 UK women have an abortion at some point in their life. So you know multiple people or yourself that will go through this at some stage in their life. So that's just how close it is to home, okay? It's not like some rare thing. Like, I feel like when you're a kid, you think it's like some rare thing that you like might know one person. No, a lot of people in your life will go through this at some stage. 95% of women do not regret that decision. Abortion doesn't harm the health and well-being of women, but being denied it results in worse health and family outcomes, as well as economic hardship and insecurity. Women denied an abortion are more likely to stay in contact with a violent partner. Only 9% of women in the study who were denied an abortion chose to have their babies adopted. The majority went on to become a parent. This is another thing, is like, I feel like the pro-lifers, they love giving this like adoption argument, which is like so much easier said than done. Like, I'm sorry, go carry a pregnancy for 9 months and then tell me how easy it is to just get the child adopted. 91% of all abortions in the UK take place within the first trimester. 91%, that's huge. That's only 9% of abortions being taken outside of that. The proportion of later abortions after 20 weeks is very small, between 1 and 2%. So again, this argument of like people unaliving fully grown babies, not true. A third of these later abortions are performed because of fetal anomaly, and the rest tend to involve some of the most vulnerable people in society, including immigrants, refugees, domestic abuse victims, those with poor physical and mental health, those living in poverty, those with geographical barriers to access, and those under 20. Okay guys, I'm going to leave it there for this week's episode. I will be back next week with hopefully something a bit lighter to talk about, but I just really feel like these last 2 episodes have been needed, not only for my sanity and to get it off my chest, but also just like, I don't know, I just feel like I need to talk about these things when I have a platform to do so. So yeah, I'll be back next week with hopefully something a bit lighter, but yeah, thank you so much for listening, and please subscribe, like the podcast, follow, rate and review. I love you guys so much. I'll speak to you in next week's episode. Bye.